Welcome back. I recently unboxed this cassette deck. You can see it in another video, and I've rigged it up and I'm going to test it today in this video. I haven't switched it on yet. It's plugged in and it's on standby, but I haven't switched it on beyond standby. I have no idea what's going to happen. It could all go tragically wrong. It could be a total waste of time, and if it is, you're going to get a very short video. Hopefully I'll be able to test it with a variety of cassette tapes which I have here. So I'm using that brand new Maxell UR90 that I have just reviewed in another video. Please check it out on the channel. And I'm using the same tracks, by the way. I'm using the no Dolby, the Dolby B and the Dolby C. So you can check the previous videos for that in-depth review. And the reason I'm using this one today is because obviously I want to know what this sounds like on this Onkyo cassette deck compared to the others, and also because I want to test it with no Dolby, Dolby B and Dolby C. That is, I want to test this cassette deck not using Dolby, using Dolby B and using Dolby C for playback. This cassette here is, you could see it also in previous videos. You can see me unwrapping and drooling over new old stock cassette tapes. This one here is, what is it? It's a TDK Cding-2. It's a Type 2 chrome position. I've already recorded onto this cassette tape. I did that a while back, not using this one. Today is just about playback. I'm not going to do any recording on it. Got this Axia J'Z or JZ metal. It's a 70-minute metal, and I've got one track recorded on it. Going to test it today as well. And I've got this. Now this is a 1980s. I can do a close-up on it. This is a 1980s Sony HF90, and this cassette tape was recorded back in the 80s, back when I was a teenager, by my father at my behest. He recorded it for me on some high-end audio equipment that he had in the living room, and I'm interested to hear what it sounds like played back today, because let's face it, a lot of us do have old cassette tapes, and we don't only use new old stock. We don't, and of course it's very difficult to buy new cassette tapes. You know, the one I've just reviewed turned out to be perhaps not up to par, but see what you think in the video I did recently. And maybe you've already bought some of these, maybe you've got some of these. Let us know in the comments if you've got these old cassette tapes, any of these old cassette tapes or this new one. So I'm going to try 4 types of cassette tape today, and after playing back each one, I'm going to tell you briefly what I thought about it. So it's not a comparison between these 4 cassette tapes. That's not what this is about. Just to be clear, what I'm doing is I want to know whether this cassette deck sounds any good and how does it fare using 4 types of cassette tape. You may notice that I've changed the speakers. That's another story for another video. If you want to see more information about this mini system, check out a video previously done recently on my channel. Right, so just to recap, it is an Onkyo K-505 from the Intec 205 series, and let's switch it on. So it's on standby. What happens when I press? Oh, nothing. So I've had this before with some of these items. You need to give it a bit of a harder press. There we are. Okay, so I needed to press, I wouldn't say really hard, but I just felt that had I pressed it any harder than the first initial press, I feel that the item would have slid backwards slightly on the shelf. So hence I supported it with my index finger and pressed it with my thumb a little harder. Right, eject. Okay, so I press eject and the number 26 popped up on the screen. Don't know what that's all about. Let's press it a bit harder. Still getting the number 26, don't know what that means. Okay, so I did like a double press in quick succession, that is, 2 presses in quick succession, and it opened. So let's assume that there is a fault with it somewhere in the logic control. As you can see, the unit itself, the main body, and not counting the feet, but the main body height of this unit is about the same as a cassette tape. And I notice a lot of audio gear from this era, especially the mini compo gear, is very similar in design. They all look remarkably similar. If you've got any, let us know, but certainly you'll see in future videos I do have some other gear that is similar, not by Onkyo. I've got a Pioneer I'm going to show you from the Phil series. That's another video. Right, I can't remember which way it goes. This way, doesn't it? The mechanism is this way, isn't it? What happens if I press? Oh, it goes in okay now. Good, okay. So that was only one press. Let's look at the settings. We've got, it's on continuous play. You can see there by that icon showing there. That arrow there means that it's going to play in that direction. Not sure what that means based on the position of the cassette tape in the drawer. We'll find out. But as that icon is on like that, it means that even if it's facing the wrong direction, the mechanism will change around because it's got auto reverse. Oh, there's the reverse mode button if you want to change that. So if you keep an eye on this icon while I press the reverse button here, well, that's obviously not right either, because that's gone into record pause mode, record hold mode. So it looks like the logic control is messed up on this. Okay, so we've definitely got issues because it started to record when I tried to stop that, when I tried to remove that. So this is going to make for a rather interesting video because the, as I said, the logic control is totally messed up on this. So how do we stop that? Let's press that. Well, that works. The counter reset works. Well, the Dolby button works. Okay, B, C, and off. How do I stop that, I wonder? Well, there you go. Pressing all kinds of buttons there. It did work eventually, but it worked after I pressed some other buttons, as you saw. And rather worrying, because I don't want to record over, although I don't care too much about the music on here because it's just a test recording. I don't want to record over it because I actually want to hear it. Just to check, I've already got the tape input mode. I've got tape selected. Let's see what happens if we press play again. Okay, no. Okay, this time not sure if you saw what happened there, but when I pressed play going in that direction, it started to fast forward or rewind depending on which direction it was facing, and when I pressed stop it went into play mode. Rather interesting. Well, we got music coming through now. Stop not working. How do we stop it? Right, so not working. So the logic control is totally screwed up on that, but not every button is faulty, and it is possible to play cassette tapes on it, luckily. So from now on, I'll just tell you my experiences using the 4 aforementioned cassette tapes. First, this new Maxell UR90 that you can see the review of, the full review of, in my recent videos. As with the sound test and review video, it sounded best with Dolby C and super bass turned up to maximum and treble turned up to maximum, exactly as I experienced with the other cassette deck in the sound test and review. Now, it sounded inferior though. I do say that it wasn't as good as the sound I could get from the other system. Then again, the other system is much better. It's a superior system. Just to recap, the 3 tracks for my test on here were from a CD, the same track recorded 3 times, no Dolby, Dolby C, and then Dolby B. So yeah, if you're walking around doing things and you're not focused on the music, I think that you would probably find it acceptable. However, if you are quite sensitive to sound quality, if you're within close proximity, if there isn't any ambient noise, I think you would not appreciate the sound from this, on this, through this setup. Yes, this setup's going to be unique to me, but my point is this: it's a mediocre setup. So whatever your setup may be, it's perhaps comparable to any other mediocre setup. And as I said, I will talk about these speakers and why I've connected them to this system in another video coming soon. Next, I'm going to try, and it's already loaded, I got it loaded in, I'm going to try the TDK Cding-2. That's the Chrome Type 2 position cassette tape, and let's see what happens. Let's hope it works. Let's see what kind of sound I get from it. Okay, so this tape, which I've just played, is certainly a lot better. It sounds much better. It's, as I said, a TDK Cding-2. It's recorded from, and this is maybe a key point here, I don't know, it's recorded from a high-res source. So I have some high-res audio files on my computer hard drive, and that was connected to one of my systems, and it was run through the amp. So it's obviously an analog recording from a high-res source, and it is a genuine high-res source. It sounds really good, by the way. So how does it sound recorded onto a Chrome Type 2 position cassette tape? It sounds excellent, and played through here I adjusted the tone controls this time. What I did was I turned up the bass as well on this. So before I had the super bass, and the super bass on this system only has 2 positions. It's got, well, 3 positions if you count off, but 2 positions when on. There's super bass 1 and super bass 2. Now I suppose that's the equivalent of saying super bass 1 is the halfway point on maybe a dial, a knob, you know, that you can turn by hand and adjust. And super bass 2, I assume, would be maximum on a dial or a knob setting. This doesn't have that. It's just a button that toggles between super bass 1, super bass 2 and off. So with the tone controls, you can adjust the tone. Remember, there is a video about this machine if you're interested. So I'm talking about this part here, yeah? So with tone controls set to maximum bass, maximum treble, and super bass 1, not 2, but 1, which would be perhaps about the halfway point on a knob. So the sound quality was absolutely brilliant for what it is, for a system like this with an old cassette deck. And I haven't inspected the head on this cassette deck, so I don't know what it's like. Does it need cleaning? Sounded fine, didn't sound like it needed cleaning. And these speakers, it should be said that these speakers have a very good frequency response. They go as low as 32 Hertz, apparently, according to the specification. Is it true? Can we get 32 Hertz out of such speakers? Well, don't know for sure because I'm not measuring it, but certainly there is an excellent bass response from these speakers. They're three-way speakers, if you hadn't noticed. So, pioneers. As I said, I will talk about them in another video. So, yeah, basically, to cut a long story short again, if that's possible with me rambling away here, this chrome Type 2 position cassette tape recorded from a high-res source from a computer hard drive through an analog system. So the computer hard drive goes into the computer then is connected to a digital analog converter. It's a Dragonfly Red, by the way, in case you're interested. And then from there it goes into the back of the amp, and then from the amp it goes into my cassette deck. By the way, no Dolby, didn't use Dolby. As I said before, I don't use Dolby usually. I especially never use it for chrome and metal cassette tapes, and I just used it in that previous sound test review for the new Maxell UR90s. Right, next test is using a metal cassette tape. So that's the chrome tape I've just used, Cding-2, 60 minutes, and that's the metal tape I've also just used. I've edited out all the fumbling about for you to save time. And what was the difference between the chrome and the metal? Well, not a lot. I felt that there was very little difference between the chrome tape on playback and the metal tape on playback. I think that if you were sitting down very, very carefully listening to both the chrome and the metal tape side by side, you may notice a difference, but for all intents and purposes there was very little difference, and the tone controls were the same for both, and I found that it was perfectly acceptable. It was a pretty good sound for what it is. So don't forget that it isn't exactly a big high-end cassette deck with all the bells and whistles, but for what it is, I have to say it is an impressive sound. I've looked up the specifications for this cassette deck and they are as follows. For a Type 1 cassette, the frequency response is given as 30 Hz to 13,000 Hz. For a Type 2 cassette tape, the frequency response is given as 30 Hz to 14,000 Hz. And for a Type 4, the frequency response is given as 30 Hz to 15,000 Hz. I haven't measured any of that. As you know, on this channel I don't, or so far I haven't got any specialist equipment for measuring stuff. Not sure if that's going to change in the future, but my specialist measuring equipment is really just my ears, and I go by what it sounds like. Do I like the sound of it? There's more to it than the sound. Don't forget that this is not all about the sound. This is not an audiophile channel. It's also about just the love of electronics, audio equipment, gadgets, and especially certain types of audio gear and gadgets and electronics. And we especially love cassette decks, cassette tapes, and do have a penchant for mini disc as well. So there will be other stuff coming soon, by the way, not only cassette decks and tapes and mini discs. I do like other stuff, and I will talk about other stuff. It's a general electronics audio gear channel, believe it or not. I've loaded the old HF90, the old Sony HF90 from 1986. This is a mixtape of mine that I made with the help of my father on his high-end audiophile gear back in 1986, and I was a teenager back then, and around 14 or 15 years old, and I'm going to find out what it sounds like to play an original old mixtape from 1986 in this cassette deck from 1998. As I understand it, it's a 1998 model. I've done a little research on it. As you can see, this video has gone into another day. In fact, it's a few days later, hence my t-shirt's changed. And I've been playing around with the deck, and I've been using it quite a lot. And I'm happy to say the logic control, although it is still a bit dodgy, it's got a lot better. It's improved all by itself. Don't ask me how, don't ask me why. Maybe you've got an explanation for that. If you do, please put it in the comments below. But amazingly, the logic control is starting to behave itself. It's starting to do what it's supposed to do. As I said, not perfect, but it is starting to do what it's supposed to do. And I'm having fewer problems with it, and I'm enjoying listening to cassette tapes on it. So I've got the old HF90 loaded, and let's listen to it. Right, so yeah, I think I've touched that enough. Just for the record, it was recorded from a 7-inch vinyl single on a turntable, which I don't remember which turntable it was that my father had, but I do remember he was using an Autophon FF10E, if I remember rightly. I think that's what it was, and it was recorded onto a Nakamichi 600 Mark II, an amazing cassette deck. And I remember back in the day, although not being an audiophile and although not knowing too much about the ins and outs of such equipment, I remember being in absolute awe looking at this Nakamichi 600 cassette deck. It's a truly amazing deck if you ever get to see it. Just visually, it's astounding, and very good in terms of music reproduction. One thing's apparent with that recording is it's definitely stood the test of time. The cassette sounds pretty good. Of course, I can't compare it with how the cassette sounded back in 1986. Has it deteriorated at all? Don't know. Still sounds good. Definitely there's a little bit of the higher frequencies missing from that, which could be that they are still present on the cassette tape but simply not reproduced by this deck. And as I just mentioned, the specification gives a maximum of 13,000 Hertz for Type 1 cassette tapes. I definitely have an audible range higher than that. I've done a hearing test, and my audible range far exceeds 13,000. Even at my age, even at 50 years old, I can still hear far in excess of 13,000 Hertz. So I was definitely aware there of some of the higher frequencies missing from that. However, the clarity of the recording still shone through. It was definitely a very good sound. It wasn't muffled in any way. It was simply a bit stifled at the top end of the frequency range. I would be very interested now, I've done that, to play that cassette tape through some higher end equipment that gives much better reproduction. And remember, with anything you're playing, with anything you're doing, there's a whole set of factors to take into consideration, of course. But as I said, today I'm just looking at this cassette deck and how it fares with different types of cassette tape. Something worth noting, not sure whether this is of any use to anybody, but it's just an observation. When the playback arrow, you can see there, is facing right, when it's pointing right, it plays the side that's facing up, in this case side A, which means the opposite case is when the playback arrow faces left, points towards the left, it plays the side facing down. Not sure if that's of any significance to anybody, but just something to note. And you may be interested also to note that the cassette tape won't go in properly if you put it the wrong way round. So it'll only go in the way it'll only go in that way. You can't accidentally put it in the wrong way round. Regarding the auto reverse mode, something I don't like about it is that there are only two settings. Of course, one setting is off, it's not on auto reverse, so you have to change the cassette tape to the other side yourself, or indeed you don't really need to do that because you can just press play in the opposite direction. That's not an issue, not got issues with that. What I've got an issue with is that when you switch on reverse mode, it for some reason only has the one reverse mode setting of continuous, and I do find that rather strange because I very rarely want continuous mode, if ever. What I would appreciate is that simply it reverses once and plays both sides of the cassette tape, then stops. I certainly don't need it to continuously play the same tape. Anyway, it's not really a gripe, it's just an observation. Although it's not unique to this, a lot of cassette decks I've seen that have any kind of auto reverse generally have three settings: off, reverse once, and then continuous. Just a recap on the Dolby, yeah, it's got B, C and HX Pro, and a reminder that HX Pro is something assigned to the recording process only and is not something that we have control over. It's factory set on the componentry inside and we cannot switch it off. We have no control over that. I haven't tried the album button or the CD dubbing or the fade. Nice little features, no doubt. Not tried them. As I understand it, CD dubbing works when connected to a CD player in the same series, and I will try it because I do indeed have a CD player in the Intec 205 series that matches this. So stay tuned for that one soon, because I will be recording on this deck. Despite the niggles with this cassette deck, I still believe it's a real bargain. I paid, I think it was around 9,000 yen, that's perhaps about £50 or $70 at today's exchange rate. If you're on a budget and you're looking to get into cassette decks, I don't think you could go wrong with something like this. They don't all have problems, some of them work perfectly fine. It sounds okay, mechanically it seems to be absolutely fine. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video.